Now we need to do some platform specific stuff. We need to fetch the printers on a Windows machine. This program will really only run on Windows, it's for SolidWorks, but this is where we'll see how we do specific things for specific platforms. So checking if we're on Windows, a specific version, and only calling printers then. Let's just take a look. So this is when we open up this dialog. We need to populate these printer names with actual printers on this machine. So the first thing we know we need is a service to handle this. So we just actually expand this. There we go. We know we're going to need a service. So the first question will be is, do we add a service in here for printer service? Do we add it called Windows Print Service and make an interface? So the first thought you might have is to make an interface called iPrinter Service. And then here, this becomes an interface. And then in here, you put, say, a observable collection of probably key value pairs, or maybe just strings, or anything that doesn't really matter at this point. Let's just say that as printer names, something like this. And you'd make it in an interface. Now, what you'd then typically do is go to your desktop here. So this would be Mac, Windows, and Linux. And you'd add into this interface something called, say, Windows Printer Service. And then in here, you'd implement iPrinter Service, implement the interface, and then here now we can return Windows specific goodness. So we can have access to specific, I think it's system.drawing.collection or something like that, a NuGet package that allows you to access the Windows printers. But first you'll realize in Avalonia, this is not how we're going to do it. And specifically due to the dependency injection that happens inside of this core application. So we need to inject a service in here. So this collection needs to have a transient because we don't need to keep it in memory. And if you were to do iPrinter Service, and now you need to pass in the Windows Printer Service, you can see we don't have access to it. So this core application, in a sense, isn't necessarily aware of the desktop because it could be a desktop, a browser. It shouldn't have awareness of it anyway. So there's one way you can do it, which is to reverse inject into this collection by making a call here that calls back into the top level program. So somewhere in here, how you've got like with interfonts, log to trace, build Avalonia app, you could change part of this code here to have a kind of callback that says, inject platform specific dependencies. But we're not going to do it that way because it's needlessly complicated. Instead, what we can do is use the inbuilt, and this is part of .NET Core, I think 6 and onwards. There's an ability inside of .NET Core, which will be this core project here, to actually tell what platform you're running on. So we can add NuGet dependencies to all platforms to this one project, and then limit that by calling only the platform we're on. So you'll see what we mean when we get into it. But the first thought you would have is to create an interface for a service, then a Windows printer service, a Mac printer service, an Android printer service, and add them to, these kind of projects. And that's not what we do. So we delete the Windows service. We don't even need an interface because it's just going to be the one printer service for now. So we'll rename this back to printer service. This can turn into a class. And in here now we can do the magic. So we'll just change that. We'll alter this after, but now we have a printer service. What we can do is go to the app, and in here, before we forget to do it, we can now just simply add a transient of that printer service. So now we've done the dependency injection. That's the hard part done in a sense. And what we now need to do is make this printer service aware of which platform it's on and handle things appropriately. Because this is only going to be Windows, we're just going to basically return a blank list for anything else, but handle Windows correctly. I think the first thing we want is something to return, and we might as well return a view model because this project has the view models and the services. I don't intend to separate them, so I feel no reason to have a data model and then a view model. This might as well just directly return view models. So for that, we'll add a new view model, and we'll call it printer details view model. It wants to be overriding a view model base. That will have to then be partial. And now in here we can define all of the properties that we need. And for now, we'll just do the printer name, I think, to keep it simple. So we'll have a private string underscore name, and that will be, just do string.empty by default so we don't have null, and make it an observable property. There's a really basic view model. We can grow this after. Let's just try to get the setup and the architecture done first. So now back into this call here. And this can just be a list. I don't think it needs to be observable, or you might as well make it observable, no harm. Observable collection of the printer details view model. We'll call this available printers. And now in here, this is where we want to create a printers list, which it wants to do like that, and return printers. And then inside here would be to do handle Windows logic to fetch printers, can't type today, from OS. So before we care about that, we just want to see if we can now hook all of this architecture up. So we have the view model, we have the printer service, we've injected it into the application, and now we need to invoke that at the correct point. So when we spin up the application, you don't want to be refreshing the available printers all the time. I don't think they change that often that we care. I don't think we want to do it when we log in or open up, because that's too infrequent. But how about when we maybe navigate to the actions page? I think tabbing between these two is also too excessive. So as you're browsing these, every time you go back to print, I don't think you really want to refresh the printer list there. We could, but for now, I think we'll just do it whenever we navigate to the overall actions page. At that point, we'll fetch the printers, and then all of this information, and specifically these drop-downs, could be populated with that information. And every time we toggle out, it wants to refresh. So let's just take a look at where that would happen. And it would be in a view model, obviously. And is it the actions page or the actions printer? No, it's the page, isn't it? So it's this actions page. And you can see already here, we inject services. So we've got the main view model, we've got a dialog service. And thanks to dependency injection, it literally is as simple as now saying we want the printer service. There we go. Printer service. And let's not forget this design time only, so it runs in the design time still. We'll just make a new printer service there. And now we have full access in this entire class to the printer service. So now let's take a look at what we want to do in this class. So if we scroll down to fetch printer profiles, this will get fired, I think, every time we enter that page. Now, every time we enter that page, there we go, we hit this call here. So that's the perfect place, I think, for doing our fetch. We've got a to-do here for pulling from the database, and that's more about pulling the saved settings. So, these values that we store, it's nothing to do with the actual printer, the live printer list. So we want to still leave this in. But before that, we need to actually fetch the live printers. So here, we now want to do var available printers equals printer service dot, and we've done something wrong there because we don't have any access to anything. We have not declared public. Let's try that again. Now in here, we should have available printers. There we go. So if that works right, we put a breakpoint here. We run this. We click actions. And now this has pulled in a count of 0. So we presume it's working. We can just put a breakpoint here to confirm. Go out, go in. And there we go. We're hitting this call. So that is everything linked in. And when we return some values, we can do something with them. And what we need to do with them is if we open one of these up, we need to fill out all this information. So starting with the printer name, we need to populate this drop down with printer name. And then we need every printer size. So that's something else we could loop after. We need the orientation. No, we don't. That's fixed. We need the tray. And I think that's it. So what we need is the trays, the paper sizes, and the printer names fetching for each printer so that we can then bind all these together. And if we look in the actions printer settings view model, you can see those lists are key value pair lists, and they are printer name options, printer size options, and source tray options. So we need to make a key value pair collection. So after we have the available printers, we need to make sure we have the names, which are available in the available printers variable. But now we need one that says, say, printer name options. And this will equal a new observable collection of key value pair string. And inside of here, what we're going to do now is get the available printers dot select on it. So we want to now select on it and get the name. But if we remember, we had an ID as well on these. So inside of these, we have the key value. So the key is the ID, the value is the name. So for that, instead of just passing a single variable, we wrap this in parentheses and do this. We now have an integer, so this is more like a common for list, and this will now be the index of the list. So this will go, 0, 1, 2, 3, and add up, so we can now make use of that. Then in here, we now need to return a new key value pair. We'll do I dot to string, and then the name. I think that's it. What's it complaining about? It can't discover it. Oh yeah, because we're just selecting on, so we've got to explicitly specify key value pair string. There we go. So I think that will convert a list of strings to a list of key value pair strings where the index is the name of the printer. We'll obviously check this is right once we actually fill it with something, and we'll see if it works. So inside of here now, we can set the printer name options to the printer name options. This gets just reused every time for now, so that's fine. But as these change, you could inject, the different options. We also need, because this will give us just the printers, we need to add a default printer. So we can leave that up to the available printers call here. So before it returns, we can say printers, or in fact, before it even adds any extras, we can just say printers.add, and then this wants to now be a new view model with a name of default. And we'll do the same name here. In fact, as well, a much better way is, as part of this, why don't we do an ID? Then we don't have to do all that strange casting. So what we could do is private string underscore ID observable property. Same thing here, string.empty, so it's not null. And then we can always match these IDs as well. So now, if we did that, we can go back to here, and all that work we did there is pointless because now we already have the value we need, which is printer details view model. So, well, it isn't pointless. You can get rid of the I. We still need to do this where we then say ID and name. So it's pretty much the same, to be honest. And now if we run that, I presume we will have the single default printer in there. And then, yeah, obviously, we've done the exact same thing as what we already had in code, which was just to return default and nothing else. So let's just test we are actually working by adding, say, another one here, and say new printer, because we've literally returned exactly what we would have returned before we did all this code. So now actions, we know that's hit, edit, drop down, and there you go. Now we've got new printer, but if you notice the default one won't have that, and that's because we're missing the default print profile that we set here also needs it. So after we've fetched the printers, we set it here. We also want to then update the default profile printer settings to have so that will actually be these print settings here. So we'll go after and then update it with them. Is that what we want to do? I think we do. And now the default should have the exact same, there we go, the same drop down. And that's, again, temporary code until these are pulled from the database, and then we won't have a default and others. It would just be all pulled from the database. So now let's just try and actually pull some printer names. And for that, we want to use a package. So we need to go into manage NuGet packages for this core project. And we want system.drawing.common. Yeah, is it this one? Add that to our project. And now we can delete this line here. And in here, we need to check if we're on Windows. So we need to say, well, let's do it without first so you see the warnings we get. So we want a var printer, print document, I think it's called, equals, and then we should have access now to print document. Yep, system.printing.drawings. And I think you just knew that up, actually. It's been ages since I've used this. And then now it's complaining. And so straight away there's the complaint. This call site is reachable from all platforms, but it's only supported on Windows. So for that, we can then wrap it in. And this is where the new .NET Core 6 onwards has this thing called operating system. Operating system, so there you go. And then in here now, you've got all these helpers that you never used to have, which is really handy. So now we know which version we're on. So we can say if Windows do whatever we want to do for Windows. And it's still complaining. And it's because it's only supported on Windows 6.1 or newer. So we need to then use is Windows version at least, major version 6, minor version 1, and there's the warning gone. So now we know this code's only going to run when we are on the correct operating system, and we're not going to get any crashes by including Windows-specific NuGet packages in the project. So .NET Core has come a long way to help us do that much easier. And now we can have a single code base without splitting out the logic between different code bases. Once we've got the printer doc, we can literally do print document dot, I think it's installed printers. No? Or is it, it's printer settings, it's a static thing. There we go. So there's a static list of installed printers. So this will give us a list of printers we want. And we want to loop those. So for each string printer name in installed printers. And then we can use this document now to access further details. So the first thing you have to do is set up the printer document. So it's kind of, you set this document up with a printer settings.name as the printer name. And then you can query on top of this then things like print document dot printer settings dot paper sizes. And I believe when you do this, it pulls in based on the printer name, then the sizes. Now I might get this wrong, but we don't really care about the print document for now. This is all we're after, the installed printer names. But I'm sure we can easily test it by doing that. I think this is the syntax. If not, we'll pull up the MSDN documents and find out how to actually do it. But that should be enough for what we need. We get the installed printers. And then here, let's just add it to the list for now. So we've got printers.add new printer view model, name is printer name, and ID is, we'd have to continue to add up. So let's say var index equals 1 because index is 0 already here. You say ID equals index dot toString index plus, and that will do us for now. So if we first, I guess, breakpoint into here and see where we get into. So we now go to actions, we hit in here, install printers, results, and there we go. These are the printers on my computer. If we then, I guess, go over, we got print document dot printer name. Oh, we haven't set it yet. How's that? Figured that out. Printer settings. Right, so printer settings is defaulted to a printer Epson for now. And if we set it to Wondershare, let's actually see paper sizes. There you go. So these are the paper sizes, I presume, for the Epson document, the Epson printer. And then if we override the Epson, which I just presume is the default printer, we'd say the Wondershare. Now do paper sizes. Yeah, there you go. You see they're evaluating now, and it's fetching the new paper sizes, which we can see there have changed. Yeah, so it works exactly as I thought. So basically, as you change this printer name and then call paper sizes, even though it just looks like a property, if we go in and look at the source, you can see it calls get printer sizes, and get printer sizes then pulls the printer name, checks the capabilities, and actually reads out the paper sizes. So it looks like you're doing nothing, but by updating the printer name, it then updates these printer sizes that we need. So ignoring that for now, we should be able to run this and see in the drop-downs all of the actual printers. So we then go to Actions, open this, drop down, and there we go. Now we have a list of printers on this machine. What we want to do next then is when we drop down and click, we need to populate this paper size and change it every time this drops down to update, and the same with the tray. And then when that's all done, we should be finished on this. I think this entire printer page then. I think it's completely and utterly done once we do that. And that's going to be a bit more complicated than it first looks, because we're going to have to hook into things like collection changed. But what we're going to have to do it on is inside of the print profiles. We're going to have to hook into this collection, and inside of the view model, and then inside of the printer settings, and then inside of that, we would want to monitor for inside of here the printer size change. So this is ultimately the property we need to monitor for changing to then update the paper size, or rather, we want to monitor for this thing changing to then fire an event off for this. So we'll do that next, but for now, we now have the printers pulling in.